Hi, everyone. This is Pastor Tabitha again, and I'm just here to share with you some thoughts about this coming Sunday's lectionary passage. But before we get started, let's take a look back at last week's passage. Last week, the lesson was on Moses and the Israelites wandering through the wilderness. Um, and they started complaining about just being in the wilderness um, and how things weren't fair and just lots of complaining. And um, Moses took it to God about the Israelites complaining, and God sent them manna or sweet bread in the mornings and sent them quail in the evenings. And they were only to gather enough food for what they would need for the day, except for on the sixth day, they could gather enough food for 2 days. Um, and um, just the lesson with that being that even in the midst of complaining, God still provides. Um, and we may not always understand our circumstances, but that the complaining really can be turned to praising. And how do we do that? Um, this week follows on the heels of that, and it is Exodus chapter 17, verses 1 through 7. In this story, the Israelites are wandering in the wilderness yet again. Um, and the people come up to Moses and they start fighting with them and complaining and give us water to drink. Why did you and Moses is like, why are you fighting with me? Like, why are you testing God? And the people, they were still so thirsty that they just said, why did you bring us out here, Moses? Are you here to kill us and our livestock and our children? Um, and so there was quarreling and fighting amongst the Israelites. And Moses goes to God and he's like, hey, what should I do with them? They're going to stone me, God. God said, go out ahead of them. Go take the elders with you um, and stand in front of you at the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock and water will pour out of it so that they may drink. And Moses did this, and water poured out, so much water that they were able to drink and be refreshed in the midst of their weariness from the wilderness. Um, so with this lesson, I was sitting there and I was just struck by the thought of it. So here's this people group who um, Moses interceded with Aaron to try to free them, but ultimately God freed them from their slavery. He freed them from their oppression in their darkest time, what we would consider a wilderness experience, actually, ironically. God freed them from that. He brought them out of there to into the wilderness, being led by Moses, which was really Moses following God through the wilderness and leading the Israelites along that way. And yet again, the Israelites, they're just not satisfied, and so they start complaining again, and they take the blame and they place it not on God, not on circumstances. They place it on Moses. Why did you do this to us? Um, and I'm just struck by this. I'm struck by the fact that how often do we blame our problems? How often do we blame our dryness on outside circumstances or even on other people, what other people are doing? Um, how often do we say that life is just so horrible for me right now, and it's because of all of these outlying circumstances? Um, and as the pastor here preached last Sunday, actually, um, it's God's leading in the wilderness. It's God's guidance in the wilderness. And all along the way, God is with us, allowing this wilderness experience, but yet He never leaves them. And so Moses intercedes for his people. This leader intercedes for his people and says, God, what can I do for them? And God gives direction so that water can come and refreshment can come. And as I really stop and I think about this, we often really get caught up in the complaining. This is week 3 now of talking about complaining, right? It was so easy to complain when things are hard. It's so easy to complain when we might feel like things are being handled unfairly around us. So easy to complain when we don't get our way, or so easy to complain when somebody else's life is better than ours. It's easy to get caught up in complaining. But when we get caught up in complaining, it's also easy to forget about where we came from. It's easy to forget about the past that we have lived, whether great or not so great. It's easy to forget where God has redeemed us. It's easy to forget where where God is with us and things. It's easy to lose sight of God next to us, and it's easy to forget that God has big plans for our future. And so as we're walking in these wilderness experiences, it's just so easy to get lost that that we just don't want to move forward. And so um, we cry out, or other people cry out on our behalf, and say, God, what is it that we should do? We need refreshment. We need a new life. We're lost in this wilderness. We're lost in this place of darkness and despair, and we just need you. We're thirsty, God. Maybe literally thirsty, but figuratively, we are thirsty for what God has to offer. We're dry and desolate, but God is with us always, and God is there next to us. And so when we cry out and say, God, I need this refreshment, God says, go to this place. Go to this place with the staff. Go to this place with the tools that I have given you, and meet me there. Break open the rock, or break open the word, break open the hardships in your life, and let my life pour out. Um, the water from the rock, it's not just the stream that flows. The water from the rock is the Holy Spirit pouring out of the hard place in order for us to receive refreshment and new life. And so I want to ask you, what in your life are you complaining about? What's going on in our lives? The hardships, the pain, the suffering. Where are we failing to see God? Where are we, or maybe not failing, but where are we struggling to see God at work? Where are we crying out to God in the midst of our hardship? How are we seeking God for refreshment? These are the hard questions that we face, and they're important lessons that we learn. Um, so I just ask you to think about that this week. Where's the refreshment in your life? What refreshment is it that we need? That's my devotional thought for this week. And let's get into the Bible verse for today. Bear with me. So the Bible verse goes like this. It says, Lord, show me your way and teach me to follow in your paths. May we remember the importance of following and trusting God even in the midst of the wilderness. And as a reminder, in the description below, you can find a junior church curriculum as well as adult Sunday school questions if you're all interested in those things. Thank you for listening to me, and I will see you next week.